It's called a cultural phenomenon. Look into it. That's what was written on the promotional postcard advertising Nirvana's Saturday Night Live performance on September 25th, 1993. Their second appearance on the iconic late-night program, with this one happening just 4 days after the release of their third studio album, In Utero. After the global sensation that was Nevermind, the whole world was hungry and waiting for new material from the biggest band in the world, and the leading foreman of the grunge movement. With its abrasive and raw sound, In Utero presents an aggressive contrast to the shiny pop sensibility of Nevermind that made the band worldwide superstars. People were still taking in and making sense of this dark and powerful body of work only 4 days in, and Saturday Night Live was giving the world its first glimpse of what post-In Utero release live Nirvana looked and sounded like. Right off the bat, the biggest difference was that they were no longer a three-piece. For the first time, Pat Smear from the legendary LA hardcore punk band The Germs completed Nirvana's lineup as their second guitarist. And Kurt Cobain wasn't wielding the usual Fender offsets or strats he was known for up until that point. Instead, he chose to introduce the sonic assault of In Utero to the world live on TV with a modified late 60s Univox High Flier Phase 1 custom. While this was a relatively new guitar to him that was being used to introduce his band's new sound, its use holds deeper meaning as its roots trace back all the way to Kurt's beginnings as a guitarist, with this being the first high flyer he was seen with after being in a position to afford any guitar in the world he wanted. It could be seen as a nod to his life before the fame, pressure, and insanity that came with becoming the voice of a generation. A giant looking back at the time before the puddle became an ocean. In this video, we will be looking at the story, history, and specs of Kurt Cobain's Phase 1 Custom. I will also be showing you my newest Nirvana guitar, my own Phase 1 Custom, which I'm proud to say is a one-for-one replica of Kurt's as it was at SNL 1993. Univox made and sold their high flyer guitars from around 1967 to 1980 as essentially a knockoff of the Mosrite Ventures models. They made 4 distinct models which they referred to as different phases. One of Kurt Cobain's first guitars was a Sunburst Phase 3 high flyer, the guitar with which he most likely recorded the Fecal Matter tape with, and the guitar he used at Nirvana's very first studio session, which produced 3 Bleach tracks. Throughout the Bleach era, Kurt went through multiple Phase 3 high flyers, a result of these being relatively cheap pawn shop guitars at the time. Even after smashing his high flyers, he would go on to repurpose their pickups in other guitars.
And these pickups are amazing. Just the tone, they just have such a bite. You can hear it, the music speaks for itself.
There is strong reason to believe that the majority of the Bleach album was recorded with a Fender Mustang that had one of these leftover high flyer humbuckers. It's hard to argue against the thought of the Phase 3 being the quintessential sound of Nirvana's entire Bleach and pre-Bleach eras. By early 1990, at the tail end of the Bleach era, the Phase 3 has left the picture after being Kurt's main guitar for the previous 3 or so years. I like to look at 1990 as a transition year of sorts for the band, with them going through 4 different drummers, and Kurt appearing with a wide variety of different guitar brands throughout the year. Ultimately, the year ends with Dave Grohl joining the band, solidifying the definitive Nirvana lineup, and Kurt getting his first left-handed Stratocaster, which officially starts his path to becoming one of the most iconic and well-known Fender players of the modern era. Fast forward now to October 3rd, 1992. Nirvana is about to go on stage at the Carver Gymnasium at Western Washington University as the unannounced, surprised opening guest for Mudhoney. It's been almost 3 years since Kurt was last seen on stage with a high flyer in November of 1989, and in the last year plus, he's been almost exclusively a Fender player. Backstage, his guitar tech Ernie Bailey arrives with a gift, a late 60s Sunburst Univox Phase 1 Custom, which Ernie has modded in a way that he knows Kurt would deem ready for stage use. He has taken off the vibrato arm mount. Kurt notoriously hated whammy bars, so in disabling it and locking it down, Ernie also removed the threaded socket so he could pick strings behind the bridge without it being in the way. Dunlop strap strap locks replaced the stock strap pins. Ernie installed an Ibanez Gibraltar bridge, a large harmonica-style bridge from the 70s. Ernie happened to have it in his parts bin, but chose it to add mass and weight to the guitar to get a bump in the sustain, as well to counter the neck dive the guitar had with the strap button being moved for left-handed playing. The pickups were replaced with a Seymour Duncan 59 in the neck position, and this is the first guitar Kurt had with a Seymour Duncan JB in the bridge position. In order to make the Seymour Duncans fit, the pickup legs were stretched out and bent straight. Ernie wasn't sure at the time if Kurt would take an interest in a high flyer again, or if it would just be a one-off destruction guitar. So rather than hand-cut a new set of custom pickup rings to fit the humbuckers, he went with the easier punk aesthetic. In my conversations with Ernie, he shared with me that he got this guitar for Kurt as a reminder of his roots and all the great times early on in Nirvana before they got swept up in the whirlwind, pressures, and the business of becoming an in-demand global phenomenon. Kurt fell in love with it instantly, so much so that he took it straight on stage and played the entire set without even plugging it in before going on. So his first time hearing this guitar through an amp was during the first song of this show. A pretty extraordinary guitar origin story, and in my opinion, it really shows the trust and bond that Kurt and Ernie had. The last time he was on stage and had the feel of this model, he was a nobody, paving his way in the underground punk scene. And now he was the biggest rock star in the world, a tabloid celebrity, and a father that had been crowned the voice of a generation against his will. According to Kurt'sEquipment.com, this was Kurt's favorite Univox guitar, and he referred to it as his plywood beast. From here on out, we see the Phase 1 in this first form the next day at the Crocodile Cafe, when Nirvana is, once again, the unannounced opener for Mudhoney. A funny thing happens at both this October 3rd and October 4th show, as the band revives the long-dead, pre-bleached tracks of Mexican Seafood, Beeswax, and Pen Cap Chew, and it's anyone's guess as to why these old songs were randomly brought out from retirement. Personally, I can't help but think that this lining up with Kurt playing a high flyer again is not a coincidence. Ernie's goal with this guitar was to remind Kurt of the joy of Nirvana's early days. Could this high flyer have inspired Kurt to dig deep into his own back catalog? After this show, this high flyer becomes one of the highlights of Nirvana's October 30th show in Argentina, a now legendary concert for the fact that it was one of Nirvana's biggest, and yet Kurt decided to troll the audience relentlessly during it. The opener for the show was the all-female band Calamity Jane from Portland, Oregon. During their set, the audience threw money, rocks, and mud at them. It was so bad that Calamity Jane stormed off stage crying. Kurt took this as an act of mass toxic masculinity on the audience's part, and to get back at them, he teased the intro to Smells Like Teen Spirit twice on the high flyer. But the band never actually played the song. During the next biggest hit at the time, Come As You Are, Kurt discards all the lyrics in the first verse and chorus and just simply yells, but again, the pre-bleach era gem Beeswax is busted out, and it's an absolutely amazing performance of it. A must-watch for any Nirvana fan. At this point in time, the high flyer itch seems to have come back to Kurt, as 3 months later, in January of 1993, we now see his Phase 2 high flyer for the first time at the Hollywood Rock Festival in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. A month later, Nirvana would travel to the frozen tundra that is rural Minnesota in February to record In Utero at Pachyderm Studios with Steve Albini. In his AMA that Albini did on the Amazing Nirvana subreddit a few years back, he listed off all the guitars Kurt used on In Utero and mentioned a Univox high flyer. While speaking to LiveNirvana.com for their recording session history guide, Ernie stated that it is understood that Kurt employed a Sunburst Univox high flyer custom on most of his guitar parts. It is not known for certain which guitars were used for which specific songs, as that has not been confirmed by anyone who was physically present at the sessions. And to make matters even more confusing, there is a chance that the Phase 1 custom was in its second form at Pachyderm. The next time we visually see it is also the last time, on September 25th, 1993 at Saturday Night Live. Here, the pickup switches are now taped down, and the stock white tuners have been replaced with Grover Rotomatic tuners. The biggest change, though, is the bridge pickup has been swapped out for a DiMarzio Super 2, and it is not currently known at this time if the neck pickup was changed as well. When I asked Ernie about this, he said this is something that is hard to recall since it's been 30 plus years. But with knowing how much Kurt liked this guitar, he sees himself as having done the pickup swap the quote-unquote proper way of making both of the brands match. So there is a chance that the 59 was swapped out for a DiMarzio, but at the same time, there's also a chance that only the JB was switched out and that the neck pickup remained a 59. And it is unclear at what point the Super 2 was put in, if it was before or after Pachyderm. What we do know though is that in this form, the Phase 1 Custom was brought out on the In Utero tour, but it was never actually used. There are a handful of glimpses of it on Kurt's guitar rack, but it seems that at this point in time, Kurt was fully in on his brand new custom shop Fender Mustangs that had Seymour Duncan JBs, as he rotated between 3 of those and his new Jag Stang without ever bringing the Phase 1 on stage. This creates a beautiful what-if scenario. Had the High Flyer itch come back during the In Utero tour, would Kurt have been inspired to bust out the pre-Bleach era songs again, but this time on Nirvana's biggest headlining tour? A question for the ages, but I think that we can all agree that songs like Beeswax and Pencap Chew would have sounded absolutely epic on the In Utero tour as a 4-piece. Present day, Kurt's Phase 1 Custom remains in the possession of the Cobain estate and was photographed for the 2015 documentary Montage of Heck. This right here is my dream High Flyer. I can't believe that I'm holding this thing and that it's real. A vintage Phase 1 High Flyer Custom from the late 60s, modded to the second form Kurt had his at Saturday Night Live and potentially at Pachyderm for the In Utero sessions. This is what I started out with an empty body and neck for an Aria Phase 1 Custom. Aside from what is written on the headstock, Aria and Univox High Flyers are the exact same instrument. They were both made in the same factory with the same parts by the same people. Both were made in the Matsumoku factory in Japan. They got branded differently depending on which market they're going to be sold in. Univox High Flyers were made for the American market, while the Aria High Flyers were branded for Japanese and other international markets. You know how we do things here at Nirvana Guitars. I just recently had my Seymour Duncan custom shop JBJ relic to match Skystang 1. Nothing is holy here, and I always want to go as far as possible for an accurate replica build. So I sanded off the Aria logo from this headstock. This was like my 5th time sanding off a headstock logo on my own, and this was by far the easiest and fastest one I've done so far. The Aria logo was on top of the clear coat, so with my handheld sander, it took maybe a minute to get the logo completely wiped off. In the moment, it honestly felt too easy. Since I ended up taking such little paint off, I didn't feel the need to add any more paint afterwards. I just simply applied a thick layer of clear coat, let it dry, and the headstock was cleared off and ready. My Univox custom logo was sourced and sent to me by my amazing friend Chris from Chris Store. These vintage logo badges very rarely pop up for sale on their own. I was chatting with Chris about this, and he happened to know where one was available at the time, and he grabbed it for me. Huge thank you to Chris for helping me out with this. And I gotta say, if you're looking to have the look and the sound of Kurt's Phase 1 Custom without paying a vintage price, Chris himself makes an excellent modern clone of it. I highly recommend it if you're interested in having a build of this guitar. For other work on my headstock, I had the stock white tuners replaced with Grover Rotomatic tuners. When I received the completed guitar, the part that most surprised me were these tuners. Probably the highest quality and sturdiest tuners I've ever tried. I can totally see why Ernie chose these for Kurt's. A vintage Phase 1 truss rod cover completes the look. And now let's move down to the body. The previous owner had a switch installed in the pickguard. My tech was able to remove it and to create a tiny little tort pattern plug to cover it, and it looks seamless. When you look at it from a distance, it just simply looks like it's part of the pattern. I had the threaded socket removed from the vibrato, and one of my favorite parts visually is this vintage Ibanez Gibraltar bridge. These things have become really hard to find now, so I'm really happy about this particular piece. I just love the look of bigger style Tunomatic bridges, and ever since I completed my KC SG, I've developed a soft spot for harmonica bridges in particular. And now for the part I bet most people are curious about, the pickups. I've got the DiMarzio Super 2 in the bridge position and a DiMarzio PAF in the neck position. This is just a complete guess on my part, but I lean towards the thought of Ernie having done the pickup swaps the proper way of making the brands match. The Super 2 has quickly become one of my favorite pickups. This thing in a Fender Twin circuit and Sans amp just screams in utero. But to be frank, I'm liking the neck PAF just as much as I'm liking the Super 2. Every pickup combination has has been delivering for in utero tones. A last but not least detail, vintage style Dunlop tuners to complete the KC setup. I've got some people to thank because without them, this thing would not be in my hands right now. My great friend Tor is the one who sent me the body, the neck, and the Gibraltar Bridge. Tor, your kindness and generosity is constantly blowing me away. I've told you this a million times, but I will seriously never be able to thank you enough. I appreciate our friendship more than you know. Also, I gotta hand it to my outstanding as usual guitar tech, Jeff, who put so much time and work into making this thing perfect. This right here was not playable when he received it. It needed a complete electronics swap, the frets were looking pretty sad, and it was in dire need of a proper setup. On top of that, he made custom pickup rings and per usual made sure that every little detail was accounted for to make this guitar as accurate as possible. Jeff, I have also told you this a million times, but I'm gonna say it again. You are seriously the best friend and the best tech a Nirvana gear nerd could ever ask for. Thank you for making yet another guitar dream of mine come true. This High Flyer feels and sounds perfect. I don't take a single second of your time for granted. And I gotta thank one of my heroes, Ernie Bailey. There is no one in the world who knows more about this particular guitar than Ernie. He is literally the guy who bought it for Kurt and modded it for him. The information I shared in this video about the specifics of the mods and why they were chosen came directly from Ernie himself. I grew up reading and watching every interview Ernie did the second they came out. Just as Kurt is the biggest influence on my guitar playing and songwriting, Ernie is the biggest influence on my understanding of the instrument and the possibilities of what can be done to them. Thank you so much, Ernie, for your time and generosity in sharing your stories and memories with me. It is an honor to be able to present these stories here on my channel. It is a thrill that I will never get tired of. But most of all, thank you all for watching so far into this video, and for all the positive comments and messages and emails that you've sent to me throughout the years. I've been creating content as Nirvana Guitars for 4.5 years now, and I'm constantly amazed at how many people out there are just as passionate about the nerdy little details of these instruments and their overall stories and significance to music history. It's been an absolutely crazy journey, and I seriously owe it all to you. I will never be able to thank you guys enough. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new about Kurt Cobain's favorite Univox High Flyer. I am completely obsessed with my own Phase 1 High Flyer here, and you can expect to see and hear a lot of it on the channel coming up. Thank you so much for watching, and an extra special shout out to my Patreon supporters. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Nirvana Guitars. Subscribe right here on YouTube for more weekly Nirvana gear videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.